if they go with.
Okay. Good evening. I would like to welcome everyone to the Henry County Advisory Board meeting for Thursday, November 14th, 2019. This meeting is being televised on Charter Channel 180 and AT&T UVerse Channel 99. It will air daily at 1 p.m. with an additional airing on Thursday at 7 p.m. A video is available on demand on the county website. Please turn off all cell phones and laptops or set them to vibrate. Anyone wishing to speak tonight, please fill out a public hearing speaking card. A total of 10 minutes will be allowed for anyone wishing to speak in favor of a case and 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of a case. For example, if 10 people wish to speak, they must share the 10-minute slot. When you are speaking, please face the board and address us directly, not the audience. If you turn to speak to the audience, the board will assume you are finished and call the next speaker. At this time, we will have the invocation and pledge by Mr. Richard.
Our Father in heaven, please grant the wisdom and knowledge to this board to support our citizens and the officials of this great county. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting is now called to order. Do I have a motion to accept the agenda?
I'll make a motion to accept.
A second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Do I have a motion to accept the approval of the September 12th, 2019 minutes?
Motion to accept.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Staff, do we have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chair. We are very proud to have a couple of new planners, and I'm sure that you'll recall Durley Navarro from our September meeting. But now we have Kenta Lanham, and he's our newest planner one, and we're so very pleased to have him, so we want to make him welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Also, Mr. Chair, just want to state that 2 of our items that were advertised have been postponed, and that is RZ 1908, Jones Drive Henry 80 Properties LLC of Stockbridge requesting a rezoning from RA to R2 for property on Jones Road. And we'll re-advertise this item when it is scheduled to come back. Also, RZ 1919 Maple Multifamily Land SE LP of Atlanta, Georgia, requesting a rezoning from RA and R2 to MU mixed use for property at 2080 Jonesboro Road. And also, when this property comes back before you, it will be re-advertised so that the public is aware of this item coming back. Also, I'll have likely met Mr. Don Viam, and he's our newest District 1 appointee. So, Mr. Viam, we want to make you welcome as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Stacy.
Thank you.
All right, with that being said, we'd like to call the first case, please.
Yes, sir. VR 1908, Whitley Engineering Incorporated of Zebulon, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 281 Mount Olive Road in land lot 83 of the 6th District. The property consists of 30.43 plus or minus acres, and the request is for relief from the paved drives requirement of the Unified Land Development Code. This is District 2, and the report is presented by Mr. Kenta Lanham, Planner 1.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair and board members. The variance request in front of you is for the property located at 281 Mount Olive Road, as highlighted on the aerial map in your exhibit books, as well as the overhead projection. The property is currently utilized as a recreational vehicle park and campgrounds. The property is zoned C3, Highway Commercial. The applicant is requesting relief from the paved drives requirement for the expansion of the existing campgrounds. This is the survey that was submitted with the application. The light gray areas represent the existing paved drives. The area here is the gravel area set for expansion. This is the conceptual site plan that was submitted by the applicant. The black area represents the existing paved drives, which was also represented by the light gray areas in the survey. And this is just the other half of that conceptual site plan. As I mentioned before, the black areas are the existing paved drives, and the dotted areas represent the gravel expansion area. The request is for the relief from the paved drives requirement. This is not a typical varianceable item. Appropriate varianceable items are usually limited to dimensional standards as per Chapter 11, Section 110203. Additionally, the applicant is able to develop the expansion area in compliance with our current ULDC without the approved variance. Given this information, staff would recommend denial for the variance request. And I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. Does the board have questions for staff?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Mr. Bishop.
I thought that there were several drives that are adjacent to the ones that are paved, but they are gravel or unpaved. And it's my understanding also that many of the residents or campers that stay here actually live year-round, and so there's a lot of traffic in and out. I would think. I was wondering if you had any concept or idea about the volume of traffic that comes in and out on a daily basis.
I do not have that information, but I believe the applicant would be able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions for staff? Okay. If there's no additional questions for staff, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mark Whitley with Whitley Engineering, 38 East Main Street, North Hampton, Georgia. I'd like to start off with just discussing and kind of talking about the existing facility as it is right now. And I don't know, can you put one of those drawings back up?
Yes, of course. Which one?
This is the one that pretty much shows the park and the paved areas. I don't know, I think it was the first or second one. That'll work there. The facility itself is about 30 acres. The area that we're actually looking at expanding is about 4 acres in the very back. So to get back there, you've got to come through the entranceway, go through the existing park, and then get to the 4 acres in the back for the new section. The park itself, when you come to the entranceway, and you kind of see it up front, you can see an office area, amenities area, a drive, which is 24, 28 foot wide going into the park, a public parking lot so that you can park and go into the office building itself, and the area where you can actually turn around before you go into the park where the campers are at. Once you get into the park itself, it's kind of laid out like a one-way, each one of these streets, because the parking spaces are angled, makes it easier for the campers to get in, and the drive is somewhere around 8 to 10 feet paved in those areas.
One quick second.
Yes, sir.
Will you put the other chart back up and kind of point that out on the map so that I understand exactly what you're speaking of, the one
Okay.
where it's actually paved in the area you're speaking of? Okay.
Let me point out. How did I do this?
Okay.
Here we
Yeah.
go. Okay, so coming in the entranceway here off of Mount Olive, and of course, this runs up to Jodico Road right close to I-75. I-75 is pretty much running parallel to the park itself right over in this area. There's a wooded area that separates it from I-75. So when you come in the park itself, there's a public parking lot to the right. There's an aisle that you can pull over so that you can temporarily get out of the way so you go into the office. And then there's a full-size drive coming through here, so you can loop right here. You don't actually get into the park itself till you start getting into this area. So you can choose any of the aisles, which are pretty much one way. The parking spots are angled so that the campers can pull in easily and then go back out the other side. To get to the section we're talking about, you'd have to come through here, all the way back to the back side, and then come into here. This is about 4 acres. The whole site is about 30. All these drives are approximately 8 to 10 feet wide. And that's why they're pretty much one way. What we were trying to achieve through the variance was to try to stay consistent with the park as it is right now. We felt that, if we're dealing with one-way drives, 8 to 10 feet, we're dealing with gravel, natural areas where the campers are actually parked, that we would be consistent with that. If we had to do asphalt or concrete on the backside, then we're creating a lot of impervious surface, which is not consistent with the existing park now. And that's why we thought that it would be something that could be received a variance as far as the pavement itself. Now, I would like to say this too. Let me go back to the actual application. Let me say one more thing about the park. If you look at some of your photos, you can see that back section that we're talking about, you'll see it's actually a gravel lot that already has campers parked on it, but they're not being used. These is more of a storage area. And you can see some of those pictures in your package. But let me go back to the application itself. My understanding, the ULDC states that all commercial entrances and exit driveways are to be paved with asphalt, concrete, or pavers. So I'm not even sure that we need a variance for what we're trying to do, because the way this thing is worded, unless I'm just misinterpreted, it says commercial entrance and exit driveways to be paved. Well, the entrance and the exit driveway is paved, and when you come into this facility, at the entranceway itself, there's a turnaround, there's a parking lot, all that's paved. And until you get further back up into the park itself, which you don't get into unless you pay to utilize that, it's not open to the general public just to come in there and ride through. It's not for that purpose. So I'm not even sure if the variance applies in this situation. That may be something we have to get some clarification from, but if it is, then we would like to have some relief from that. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Chair, I can tell you it is.
Okay. Thank you, Stacy. Does the board have questions for the applicant?
I'd like to know what the staff's interpretation is.
Okay. Stacy, elaborate.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. This property is Zone C3. It is a commercial business. The drives and any parking areas would be required to have a paved, dust-free surface. So it is required to have pavement. We considered whether we as staff could address this concern administratively, but the only thing that staff can evaluate administratively is for an area that is not open to the public. And of course, the whole purpose of the expansion is so that it's open to the public. So it's a commercial endeavor. The drives and any parking areas are required to have a paved, dust-free surface. So the drive aisles are required to be paved. This is not something that could even be considered administratively. Unfortunately, it's not also something that is a varianceable item, which is typically a dimensional standard like a setback or something like that. So because it's not something that's specifically listed in the Unified Land Development Code as being a varianceable item, we've evaluated this and we do recommend denial of the applicant's request.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Carmichael?
Was the existing facilities established prior to the adoption of the current Unified Development Code?
I don't know that. I know that this facility's been in place for a long time. I'm guessing 30-plus years. So I'm guessing it would be in place before the ULDC was put in place.
And I may be able to provide some insight as to that. On July 7th, 1992, the Henry Board of Commissioners approved the rezoning request for the subject property from RA to C2. And then on July 17th, 2001, the Henry County Board of Commissioners approved a rezoning request for the subject property from C2 to C3. Both cases had conditions attached to it. The first rezoning case in 92 had one condition. The rezoning case in 2001 had 13 conditions.
Okay. Mr. Moore?
Mr. Forsyth, those conditions, were any of those conditions ones that would directly address whether something had to be paved or if it could still be gravel?
There is no mention of paved or gravel drives on this for these conditions.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, I just want to state that we try to avoid having conditions that duplicate the requirements of the ordinance. So if the ordinance requires it anyway, there would be no real need for a condition.
I understand. So lack of that doesn't mean it's okay. It just means it's not duplicated.
That's correct.
Thanks for the clarification.
So currently you have gravel, or is it a combination of natural turf and gravel, or you're going to add gravel to that area?
The existing park is natural areas with gravel lots where the campers actually park. And then it has the 8 to 10 foot paved driving surface through the facility.
Right.
The back lot itself right now is a gravel parking lot
Okay,
with stored campers parked on them at this time.
right. And
Yeah.
so you want to transition that from storage to active
To
campers?
actual campsites, yes. Yes.
Well, I guess my question would be, at some point, I think the intent behind the requirement, one of the intents behind the requirement is that we are able to get emergency equipment in these type facilities. And how, to the applicant, how do you plan to suffice that without gravel in this area? Or without paving the area?
I don't think we have a problem with being consistent with the existing park and providing those one-way drives at approximately 10 feet, maybe even 12 foot if we have to. But we would just like to be consistent with the park at this point. We really just, don't see the need of going through 15 to 20 acres of campsites that are natural with gravel campsites with approximately 10 foot of pavement, and all of a sudden we go all the way to the back, and then we have to pave nearly 3 to 4 acres of an area for campsites. So we just don't see the consistency of that. It's I guess to us, we're having a hard time understanding why we'd have to do that.
Now, if you will, point out on the map, go back to the map
Yes,
and
sir.
point out the area that you are saying that you guys would be comfortable with paving
Yes, sir.
opposed
Oh.
to,
Of course, coming through the existing facility here, you get access straight through here, and then when you get to our site back here, we would be willing to actually pave these lanes that pretty much meander through the campsites themselves. What we don't really want to do is we don't really want to go in there and do all the pavement where the campers actually sit on.
okay,
Because then we're doing a 3 acre parking lot if we do that.
okay.
That's not consistent at all with what we've already got.
You'll get trucks.
Right. It's just a big parking lot if we do that.
So, let me ask, okay, sorry, Mr. Richard, go ahead.
I thought the request was really applying to the paved driveways and not necessarily the spots where the campers are, but saying that, in the staff report, there's an extensive amount of, an extensive list of conditions, and particularly because in many cases, the people that stop at this place often stay here for more than a year at a time, and actually they can renew it, and in many cases they have become permanent residents. I think this campground was actually established back in the 1970s, so it's been there quite a while, and it's always had a reputation of being a year-round place to live for many people, and and therefore one concern would be the amount of dust or dirt from runoff, and what kind of conditions that would create for year-round residents. I think that ought to be something to consider.
Mr. Moore.
This is a question for staff, and maybe Mr. Stacy can help me with this. So, the parts where you drive in between the lots, you guys are planning on paving that. The spots where the campers actually pull onto, you're giving them plenty of paved access in and out of the space, but once they park, they're on either gravel or dirt or something, natural land.
Yeah, that's
So when people go
correct.
camping, they don't want to
Yeah.
camp in a parking lot. They want to camp in natural land.
Right.
So, Mr. Stacy, is it the staff's understanding or that y'all want the spaces in between the lanes paved as well? Is that correct?
It was my understanding that the applicant's request was to have relief from the requirement for the paved drive aisles.
So that everybody's on the same page. The driveways you're going to pave, the spots in between the driveways, you want to leave natural. Is that correct?
If the interpretation is that really to be able to meet the code, would to be able to provide just the paved driveways, but the other areas we don't have to, as long as we can limit those drives to single one-way drives instead of 24 foot, let's go half of that.
10 foot or so.
So we're not doing two-way traffic, because we're not trying to do two-way traffic.
To me, it sounds like there's been a miscommunication.
It could
Y'all
be maybe a
y'all are just saying we don't want to
misinterpretation
pave
on
the
my
whole
part.
place.
Well, there we go.
So I mean, if staff's okay with that, then we could agree to that.
Now, I mean, is your recommendation the same if they're driveways?
Well, we don't have an objection to the applicant paving those drive aisles, certainly. we don't have an objection to paving over the entire lots, because as you said, no one wants to go to a campground and camp out in a parking lot.
Right.
And indeed, the existing conditions state that there will be a fire ring and other features that are appropriate for an RV campground. The issue that we would have to have 8-foot drive aisles is that the ordinance, the supplemental standards in the ULDC for recreational vehicle parks require an internal street width of 28 feet from edge to edge.
Is that asking for a two-way street?
It
Would a
doesn't
one-way-
specify, but
one-way
it would
street
certainly
still
allow
need
for
to meet
two-way
that?
traffic,
Yeah.
yes.
That
Now-
may be more of an issue than the actual pavement is the width that we're talking about.
When we advertised this item, we advertised it as a variance from development standards for this purpose.
Okay.
So if this board wants to address something other than the simple relief from having paved drive aisles, you may certainly do so.
All right, thank you, Stacy. I
Thanks, Stacy.
think we're clear in terms of where we are with this now. So at this point, does the board have any additional questions for the applicant?
I have one for staff.
Okay.
And I know we were talking about RVs here, but in the situation, if this was gonna be like for a truck parking situation, like 18-wheelers, would that whole area have to be paved or just the aisles?
The whole area.
So if we put a motion forward that says that they're only gonna pave the aisles, would that create any problems for us later on?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right. Any additional questions for the applicant? If not, Mr. Richard.
Okay, let me just get one thing, straight if I could. I think because of that these camping sites are at an angle, that, all of the traffic is one way, and that the drive is, 8 to 10 feet, throughout the camp, I believe is what you said.
Yes.
So you're not objecting in this new section to having paved one-way street or driveway system, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We would be okay with that.
Okay. 10 foot setback. 10 feet. Do we have a mic open now? Is that?
Do you need this, do you need?
No, I keep hearing it.
I know, well, that's, yeah, mine is definitely on.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Mr. Vim.
As far as for fire safety on those, would a 8 to 10 foot lane be able to accommodate the fire department appropriately?
And Mr. Beam, I can tell you that I am not qualified to speak on behalf of the fire department, and perhaps the applicant could help me, but it's typical for the fire department to require 20 feet
Okay.
to accommodate the fire trucks.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
not
Well-
sure on
well-
this type of facility.
Right. Well, what we'll do is, let's move forward at this point. Do we have any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, if not,
Thank you,
we'd
sir.
like to call, you may be seated, sir.
Okay.
We'd like to call anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. Okay. Okay, no one's coming forward. We'd like to call anyone wishing to speak in opposition of this case. We'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the case. Okay. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant?
Well, no, not questions, but just comments. And I'm not sure if we addressed Mr. Rischer's concern about the residual dust or,
Yes.
so maybe we do need to
Okay.
have
Will
him
you
come
come
back
back
up.
forward,
But-
sir?
This area is really secluded. This is not really bothering anybody. I want to be able to work, I want to give you what you want. It doesn't make any sense to me to say no and require you to pave that whole thing. Obviously, I think probably everyone agrees with that. I think the question is going to be how wide that lane has to be in terms of access, emergency access. And then, I mean, you have some gravel natural areas now. In the summer when it's dry, is there a lot of blow up of dust and gravel can be dusty? Is that an issue? Is that going to be an issue?
Personally, I don't think it's an issue because the areas that's going to be graveled is not areas that you're driving 10, 15, 20, 25 miles an hour. It's an area that you slow down, you back in, you stop and park.
Stopping.
I don't see that being a problem, but I would also like to indicate that on our campsites, we are proposing between each campsite a 4-foot landscape area. So in between those gravel areas, we'll be putting in sod, some trees occasionally in those areas too. So it will not be all gravel, that lot.
That does help. We keep learning as we go. Does that answer your question, Mr. Risher? Does that help you? Are you still concerned about that?
Yes, my concern was that they would be extending all these driveways with gravel.
I see.
And
then there,
but as I understand, all the driveways in the new section would be paved just like they are in most of the old section or the current section.
Correct.
Well, yeah, one question I have for you, being that you're requesting a variance or asking for a variance, do you have a problem with maxing out at a minimum of 10 feet driveway throughout those areas that we spoke of in the past?
I think 10 feet will be fine.
Is that going to be enough, though, for emergency access? If you say the minimum is 20, what the fire department typically would ask for or require, is sort of a...
But to maintain consistency with
that's
what
true.
they have, you're able to get, I would think as of now, we are able to get fire units in there with the 10 feet, and you have turnaround areas within there. Is that correct?
What I would recommend is that any motion for approval would include language to be very specific. So for example, the language may be, if it's the pleasure of the board to approve, that for 2-lane traffic, that the minimum width of these drive aisles would be 28 feet. And that for one-way traffic, that it would be a minimum of 10 feet, provided that where required by the fire marshal, they will be 20 feet in width.
If the fire marshal requires that.
Otherwise, for one way, it would be
Gotcha.
10.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, I understand that. If the
Okay.
We'd have to work it out with the fire marshal.
Okay.
If you could possibly word it that, just in case fire marshal says they're okay with the 10 or 12 feet instead of the 20 feet
Right.
that we obviously meet their standards or whatever they require.
Okay. All right. Does the
Okay.
board have any additional questions for the applicant? Okay. Okay. If not, you may be seated, sir. Thank you. Does the board have any additional questions for staff? Okay, if not, call the case.
VR 1908, Whitley Engineering Incorporated of Zebulon, Georgia, requests a variance from development standards for property located at 281 Mount Olive Road in land lot 83 of the 6th District. The property consists of 30.43 plus or minus acres, and the request is for relief from the paved drive requirement, and this is District 2, and the report was presented by Mr. Kenta-Lanham, Planner 1.
Okay. We have heard the case. Do we have a motion?
I do. Mr. Chairman, I would like to recommend that the board rejects staff recommendation of denial and instead approves this request with the following conditions. That if this does in fact become a 2-lane road, 2-lane, that you would have a minimum 28 feet width. And if we're looking at one-way, minimum 10 foot. And if the fire marshal says you need 12, you would have to extend to that with approval by the fire marshal. I hope I said that right.
Okay.
Will that get it done?
Yes, ma'am.
We
All
have a
right.
motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion? Okay.
Before we vote on, I have one question.
Okay.
Should we also include in that the stipulations made by the commissioners on July 17th, 2001 would be included in those requirements.
I think we're voting on a variance, so those stipulations are within the requirements. If I'm,
Yeah, they're already.
right, they're in there,
Okay.
and he has to meet those requirements.
Okay.
But we are allowing a variance.
Probably already has.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor? Motion carries. Okay. Call the next case, please.
CU 1909, We Partner Management LLC of Peachtree Corners, Georgia, requests a conditional use for the property located at the southwest corner of Mount Carmel Road and South Mount Carmel Road in land lot 150 of the 6th District. The property consists of 11.713 plus or minus acres, and the request is for an assisted living facility in District 2, and the report is presented by Ms. Darely Navarro, Planner 1.
Good evening, Chair and board members. This conditional use request is for property located at the southwest corner of Mount Carmel Road and South Mount Carmel Road, as highlighted in green in your exhibit books and shown on the overhead screen. The subject property is zone RA. The conditional use request is to develop an assisted living facility with a total of 199 units, which provide senior adults multiple levels of care and assistance. An assisted living facility is permitted in the RA zoning district with an approved conditional use as per the ULDC. Staff has reviewed the applicant's request and recommends approval with 5 conditions shown on the overhead screen. Thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does the board have questions for staff? Okay, no questions. If not, we'd like the applicant to come forward, please. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is David Versell. I'm with We Partner, located at 7094 Peachtree Industrial Boulevard in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. Thank you for bringing up the presentation. I'd like to take a few minutes to kind of explain a little bit more detail about the project that we are proposing here at Mount Carmel and South Mount Carmel Roads. We've studied the market here in Henry County and found that with all of the growth that's happened here, there's been very little new housing aimed at the oldest seniors. Obviously, there's a lot of active adult housing on the south side in Henry County and surrounding areas, but in this development cycle, there has not been any new assisted living or kind of what we would call integrated senior living that I'd like to share with you what that is, that you've seen a lot of elsewhere around the country and elsewhere in the Atlanta area. So very quickly, an integrated senior living community as we are presenting it is something that's not just what you might think of as an institutional living facility. It's an attractive campus that has multiple buildings, green spaces, as was mentioned by staff, different levels of care, including assisted living, Alzheimer's and memory care, and independent living. The kind of amenities you might associate with a Class A apartment building or even a resort or a hotel in some cases, and basically just creating a communal feeling that you would not have seen 10, 20, 30 years ago in the senior living facilities that many of you may be familiar with. I want to just quickly run through the different components of an integrated senior living community as we are proposing it here. The main building would be the main entry point in this case. And our main building is actually the assisted living building at the front along Mount Carmel Road. And all of the buildings are interconnected. So you'd have that main entry. There'd be a separate entry off of South Mount Carmel Road, which I'll get to when we get to the site plan for the independent living building. It has one large commercial kitchen, and all the meal service for the residents is provided from that kitchen. There are multiple dining rooms within the main building. activity spaces, a theater, exercise rooms, places for classes, a library, depending on the operator we come up with. Sometimes they'll have, a billiards room or a massage room or different things. But basically, this building is the heart and soul of the community. It's where people all come together, they eat their meals, they spend time with their friends, and they socialize with each other. The outdoor spaces, as we mentioned, are designed to be very attractive and welcoming. There are multiple courtyards around the property, as well as a park space that you'll see in the site plan. And each of the different components has its own dedicated courtyard. That's particularly important for the memory care facility because the people in that facility typically have advanced dementia or Alzheimer's, and they need to have an outdoor space where they can actually get out of the building, but it has to be gate controlled so they cannot wander off, because that is a frequent concern in properties like that. And you don't see it so much in the sample images we're showing here, but typically you like to have shaded spaces, gazebos, sitting areas, etc., where the residents can be outdoors even in warmer weather. Just a couple of images that I wanted to show you here. These are from a project called Arbor Terrace at Burnt Hickory in Marietta, Georgia. I'm showing these because we are working on a similar community with the same developer of this property, Hollander Senior Living, also out of Marietta. And they have expressed a strong interest in being our partner on this. So we're aiming to have this kind of development, this kind of finish. The high-end dining room, as I said, looks like a resort hotel, and the theater space that has the comfortable seating and shows movies and other programs. The common areas within the main building are comfortable areas where people can just sit and quietly or read. Typically would have a fireplace. We would plan on doing that with a library and other things that you feel like you're in a nice living room or the lobby of a luxury hotel. So the plan, as I mentioned, and what you had seen in the package, that was a line drawing of this. This is a little bit more detail about what we're proposing. As I said, it's one main building divided into 3 separate components. Along Mount Carmel Road at, if I can do this. Along here, Mount Carmel Road, you would see just a narrow bit of a 2-story building right at the corner where the letter B is on the diagram. The assisted living facility would be a 2-story building. The memory care unit is always 1 story. You don't want to have any elevators or stairs for the individuals living in that wing of the building. So from the frontage of it along Mount Carmel Road and South Mount Carmel Road, it's a relatively low building. The independent living wing at the back of the site would be a 3-level building, but as you can see, it's set a couple of 100 feet back from the road, and the site actually slopes gently downward from the streets down to the back of the site. So it would not stand out as being a particularly imposing building because it's set way back, and the roof line is really only about 1.5 to 2 stories above street level. The total unit count, as was stated, is 199. Be 50 units of assisted living, 30 units of memory care, and 119 independent living units. And as I said, every one of the units will have access to outdoor spaces. Just want to do a quick walk through what these buildings actually look like and the units look like. Independent living is essentially a senior apartment. For all intents and purposes, it looks like any other active adult apartment that you might see. It's usually a 1 or 2 bedroom unit that has a kitchen, a living room, and a full kitchen, I should say, which is in contrast to assisted living, which does not have a full kitchen. The typical age of residents of these unit types is in the early 80s, so the average age is about 82. So that's the population you're serving here. Still active, still able to take care of most of the things they need in life, but just want to have a low maintenance lifestyle and not have to worry about meals, not have to worry about taking care of a house, and not have to worry about driving places to have a social life or activities with friends. The assisted living component, these are more like a hotel suite, I would say, than an independent living apartment. There is a small kitchenette, but not a full kitchen. There would not be a stove in an assisted living unit. These are usually residents who are typically a little older, late 80s into their 90s, who need assistance every day with bathing and dressing and medications. And so it's a little bit smaller of a unit and a little bit less like a true apartment. And the final component is the memory care. These essentially are small, one-room spaces, and no kitchen or anything. Because again, you have people living in these facilities who have Alzheimer's or dementia. They typically have their doors open at all times, if they have doors at all, so staff can come and go and frequently check on the residents of these units. In the memory care unit, most of the space is common space. So you have these small private sleeping areas, and then the residents spend most of their time out in the common spaces. We obviously have spent a lot of time thinking about this. We've met with staff, met with Commissioner Clemens in District 2 and talked through this concept. And we've heard some concerns about the project. One is that we understand that within the assisted living definition in Henry County, it is possible to have a drug or substance abuse treatment facility. We are more than willing to accept a condition that prevents us from doing that. We do not want to do that. That is not our intent. This is not a bait and switch. And should the ZAB wish to impose such a condition, we'd be very willing to embrace it. Another concern we've heard about is traffic. And if I can go back to the site plan here for a second. We're aware that this series of intersections here, where South Mount Carmel Road comes in and North Mount Carmel Road comes in over here, can be tricky. It can get congested. We are aware that there is a plan that the Henry County DOT has put forth that would realign the streets. We are proposing to help with that by dedicating the right-of-way, as shown here, to relocate South Mount Carmel Road. Currently, it runs straight up and down around the right side of the image here, and we would realign it in coordination with what the county DOT has already expressed they'd like to see, and dedicate that right-of-way to help improve the safety of that particular intersection. Back to traffic. We did, although staff did not require it, we did commission a traffic impact study. We hired NV5 Calyx Engineering to do that for us, and we did present that traffic study to staff, so can certainly talk through that. But you can see that the study concluded that the nature of this facility, with residents who do not work, many of them don't even own vehicles, and it generates very little in the way of peak hour traffic, fewer than 20 trips per hour beyond what's projected based on growth in the area, according to our traffic consultant. The existing volume through that intersection at South Mount Carmel Road is about 1,200 trips at peak hours on weekdays. So this project would only increase the peak hour traffic volume by about 1 to 1.5%, according to our traffic impact study. Also, I'd like to highlight, in addition to the things I mentioned already about the high quality housing and filling a market need, is that this does create a decent amount of jobs in the healthcare field and the personal care field, and tax revenue to Henry County, and no school impacts, because all the residents here will be well past having school-age children, and children can't even live here anyway. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and also have with me here this evening our civil engineer, Michael Elliott from Metro Engineering, who can answer any technical questions. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Does the board have questions for the applicant? Mr. Bishop?
Yes, could you or your engineer, show us where the nearest sanitary sewer line is that would serve your complex?
Yes. So we do have a water and sewer availability letter from the Water Authority. The existing sewer line is, so there's this piece that we have. I don't know if we can get an image up that you had that first image that had the area map. I can show you exactly where it is, and Mr. Elliott can as well. Yeah.
Can you go back to that? You had an aerial map on the county tax map. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Risher, members of the board. Mr. Risher, obviously this is the Rowan property here that is up for discussion tonight. Rowan property across the street as well. It adjoins the Wrangle at the Preserve subdivision that Mr. Jones just developed, probably about, well, the houses are already built. Within that development, there is a stub out of a sewer line to the south onto Jeff Rowan's property. We are going to go across that. Of course, we're going to acquire both tracks, but there will be a sewer outfall that gravities to that, and we've already shown that conceptual design to the engineering manager at the Henry County Water Authority as part of our availability application, and they've granted us that. There is capacity within that. So this site actually gravity flows to the north and into that existing subdivision that's already built. There's already a sanitary sewer manhole on the property.
Okay, thank you. So it is close by or at the property, so that's
About 1,000
that's
feet,
good to
yes,
know.
sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay, any additional questions, Mr. Richard?
Not right now.
Okay. Mr. Brown?
Yes, on your independent living, you said there would not be any children allowed to stay there at all. That's going to be part of the covenants of the compound.
That's correct. No one under the age of 55 would be permitted to reside in those units.
Okay. And on your memory, Kate, persons that you have there, I noticed that you said the doors would be open to their rooms, or they would be, at some point in time, they could be closed or something?
Yeah, they have doors. I'm just sort of explaining how it works. So the assisted living and memory care components are licensed by the state of Georgia. You cannot operate such a facility without a license, and prior to obtaining a license, there would be a thorough inspection done by the State Department of Community Affairs in order to grant those licenses. The memory care unit is locked and secured 24 hours a day, and the reason that the residents' doors are typically left open is for their own safety, so they can be monitored by staff.
Okay, when you say the buildings are going to be interconnected,
Yes.
Does that mean that there would be access from one to the other through a local door or a common area?
Yes, so you can see where the assisted living and the independent living buildings come together. There would be a corridor that goes between them. Once you're in the building, you can walk freely between those two pieces. But as you see, the memory care unit is a little bit put apart from that, and there would be a locked, secured door on either end of the memory care unit that you can only get in with a key fob if you're on staff. The residents cannot come and go freely.
Okay.
Any additional questions for the applicant? Mr. Richard?
Could the staff show us where the closest fire station is that would serve this site?
Mr. Richard, I can tell you that I'm not aware of where the closest fire station is.
I think it's near the North Mount Carmel Park. I believe it's Station 11.
That's very likely.
So I don't think it's very far away.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any additional questions?
I have a question,
Okay.
just for clarification. So you're building the building, but you're not actually doing the operational aspect of the,
Right.
Correct.
So, right, it's a very specialized industry.
Right.
And so we would contract with a third-party operator. The project that I had mentioned that we're already pursuing, we have a company that specializes in just this, and we've signed a 10-year operating agreement with them to manage that building. And so, we are a real estate company. We do not manage this sort of product.
Right.
And so we would have a contract with a qualified operator. And again, that operator would have to be fully licensed by the state in order to open and operate the facility.
yeah. So do you start building before you have that contract in place?
No.
Or
No, we would
Okay.
not be able to get financing for the project
I
unless
see.
the operator has
Sure.
already been identified.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? Okay. If not, you may be seated, sir.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we'd like to allow 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in favor of this case. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Okay. Again, please.
Mark Whitley, Whitley Engineering.
Okay.
I just want to say something, Mr. Richard. brought up the issue about sewer, and I just want to affirm something that Mr. Elliott had said. Our firm actually designed the Wrangle subdivision several years ago, which is constructed now, and we designed the sewer with the intent of knowing that sometime there would be property to the south that would tie to that. So I did want to affirm that that is the case.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We have additional time. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this case? Okay, if not, we'd like to allot 10 minutes for anyone wishing to speak in opposition. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Mary Coffin. I live at 135 South Mount Carmel Road. And I can see my property from right here. I can see that property from my front porch. I have questions if this is going to be considered conditional use. What happens later on if this is not going to work as a conditional use situation? Typically, conditional use, I thought there was something already there, and for this particular time frame, it would be used for that purpose, and then later on, if it changed, it would have to go back and be considered again. That's a question. I've been there over 27 years, and it's a very quiet country community. However, with the development of just houses around there, I have to be real careful when I cut my grass because I have no curbs, no sidewalks. I'm at the road when I cut the right-of-way, and we keep it cut. We are residential, but we are a small acre community for the most part down there, and people have been there for quite a long time. The pictures that we were shown tonight with more than one story looks like just your typical apartment living. There'll be service deliveries coming and going to this place. There'll be 24/7 traffic with staff coming and going. And also, there'll be outside lighting, and we're very much happy with our quiet, just non-lit street down through there. That was a dirt road when we bought our house or bought our property and built down there. We enjoyed that. On the issue of the traffic survey, we saw those cameras up for 2 days. And let me tell you, we never can leave our driveway that we don't have to wait for 3 or 4 cars and school buses coming through there.
Thank you. We have additional time. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of this case?
Hi, my name is Linda Phillips. I am located at 213 South Mount Carmel Road. I am the closest residential property, which I have a mini farm. The land between the Rohan acreage that we're speaking of, that the facility is wanting to be built at, there is also a large tract of land that belonged to McMahon. It's approximately 167 acres. And that runs beside and behind my property. So I'm concerned if this is turned into basically a commercial piece of property, is this later going to make the land that's going to be beside me and behind me commercial property as well? Because I'm not real sure if that's going to make the value of my property increase or decrease. But as she was mentioning right before me, the road when I moved there was a 1-lane dirt road. It has now been paved as a 2-lane paved road. The traffic is horrible. The road is never ran on the speed limit that is indicated there. The trash has gotten ungodly up and down this road. The next thing with this being a assisted living home and the people of that age, I think it's going to be a big nuisance. I mean, with a lot of the emergency vehicles coming in and out, these people expiring or being sick. We already have the fire department that's a noise nuisance that is on North Mount Carmel Road. But the other thing I'm wanting to know is if this is going to be water that is going to be ran from Mount Carmel Road on down South Mount Carmel Road. You know, just a lot of little questions, but the main thing is if anyone's aware of what they're going to do with the property that is beside the Rohan property that becomes the McMahon property that is the 167 acres. And then it was also mentioned that the Rohan property across the street on Mount Carmel Road is going to be something, and I would like to know at this time if anyone's aware of what that piece of property is going to be becoming, which would be at the corner of North Mount Carmel and Mount Carmel Road. I know that's a lot of questions, so maybe I should have asked one question and got an answer.
Well, let me say, ma'am, at this point, this is not a question and answer session for us to answer those questions. Those are questions that you would have to take before the county because we may or may not know the answer to those questions. What someone else is doing with their property, we don't have any idea.
Okay. Not even the Rohan property that would be across the street from this?
That's something that you would have to address with county staff at a different time. This is not you can address any concerns that you have, but we don't have answers for you. The board does not.
Okay, well, I'm aware that they have put a roundabout that's on Mount Carmel Road and Chambers Road, but does anyone know if they're going to put maybe a traffic light or anything at that location in the near future?
Stacey, do you have any knowledge of any of that?
And Mr. Chair, I can address as much as you would like me to. I am not aware that there is a plan to replace the roundabout with a traffic light. I don't think that is in the works.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe you misunderstood the question. I'm wanting to know, is there going to be a traffic light at the intersection of South Mount Carmel Road and Mount Carmel Road?
I am not aware of an improvement that is planned for the intersection where South Mount Carmel and North Mount Carmel will be realigned at Mount Carmel. I am not aware of what sort of improvement is planned for this area. I can tell you that a roundabout would be considered before a traffic light. But at this point, I don't know that there is a roundabout that is planned. I'm just not sure for this area. Mr. Chair, if you'd like, we could discuss the future land use map for this area, which is the county's guide for future development. And if you'd like me to, I can certainly do that.
We'll get back to that, Stacey, but as of now, I would like to move forward as we are now.
Is there going to be water, county water, that's going to go into that property?
Of course, they're required to have water.
But I mean, majority of people are on wells. I'm wanting to know.
Well, that the county, the requirements is that they have water. They won't be on a well system there.
Okay.
That's one of the. I mean, I'm sure everyone up here could answer that question, but they are required to have water, county water.
Okay. Is there anybody that knows if they're going to try to widen South Mount Carmel Road any more than it already is?
Let me say, ma'am, as of this point, the board does not answer those questions. That's something that I would like for you to get with staff on at any point in time, at your leisure. Get with staff, get with the county, and determine what's going to happen out there. We do not know.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, we have additional time remaining. We would like to allot that time for anyone else wishing to speak in opposition. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of this case? Okay. No one else is coming forward. Does the board have additional questions for the applicant? Okay. I have one question. Will you come forward, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You've heard some of the concerns out in that area.
Yes.
In terms of county, I made a statement that county water would be part of that facility.
Mm-hmm.
So will you elaborate on the facility, county water, and the traffic, or whatever improvements you guys plan to make out there?
Yeah, can we put this back on? So yes, as you acknowledge, we did have to, with our application, submit an availability letter from the Henry County Water Authority showing that we have the ability to access both county water and county sewer. And that's the plan here, obviously. We would not do a facility of this size and scale on a well or a septic system. That would be completely not feasible. In terms of what we are suggesting, again, we met with Henry County DOT with Mr. Simmons and talked through the plan for the area that was referenced by staff. And we are offering to contribute the right-of-way as shown here that would allow the existing alignment of South Mount Carmel Road is about here on the right side. We would dedicate this right-of-way from the property to line up here, which would then eventually line up with the future connector road to the north. We have no concept of what that intersection might look like because it hasn't been designed. It's just a plan at this point. But you know, if you can take a look at our traffic impact study, which we did submit to staff a couple of weeks back, it emphatically states that this project will not necessitate any traffic signal or any further off-site improvements along Mount Carmel Road or South Mount Carmel Road, again, based on the very small increment of traffic volume that would be added by a development such as this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, yes, sir. We have additional questions. I'm sorry.
My
I
apologies.
was kind of impressed that you guys wanted to help improve the infrastructure for the area that you're altering. We don't hear that very much, so the fact that you're willing to step up and do that. But the nice lady that got up and expressed some concerns, one of her concerns was about lighting and the overflow of lighting onto an area that was, you know, that normally doesn't get that much lighting. Would your company be willing to direct those lights to the inbound part of the property? Because they have the technology to have light go in one direction and not get as much overflow of light before. Could you help accommodate some of those concerns with your choice of lighting? Would you be willing to do that?
We would have to meet the lighting standards in your development code, and the plan that we submit would do that. Now, in your development code, as you know, there are standards about, you know, lighting coming off site and having to mitigate against that. I think one important point on this is we are getting a conditional use permit for this new use, but we're not rezoning this. This is still in the rural residential district, and as such, we actually have more stringent setback requirements here than we would if this had been in an R2 district or a mixed-use district. If you look along the southwest corner here, the property line here, that's a 50-foot setback here, and along the front road frontage, it's a 75-foot setback, which is the same setbacks that any other use in the rural residential district would have to conform to. So if this were, again, in a more high intensity district, the building could be closer to the road and it could be closer to the adjoining property lines. So I'm not prepared to, you know, tell you right now that I know exactly the type of light fixture we're using, because we'd have to work with our architect and our operating partner on that. But again, you have these lighting standards in place that we have to conform with in order to get our building permits.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions for the applicant? Okay, if not, you may be seated, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for staff?
I do.
Okay.
Under conditional use, what other potential undesirable uses of this building could happen in the future? We mentioned the drug rehab, and he's willing to put a condition on there that would never be used for that. What else might be possible?
So, Ms. King, the conditional use is specific for assisted living, In other words, it's not transferable between assisted living and personal care home and nursing home and so forth. So it's tailored in that regard to assisted living. The definition of assisted living doesn't mention the treatment of drug and alcohol dependency, so it's very appropriate to include a condition that would state that the on-site provision of the treatment of drug and alcohol dependency is prohibited.
Okay.
And I'm not aware of other negative uses that might happen under a conditional use for assisted living.
Okay.
If it provides clarity and if it's useful, I can tell you, I can't speak for other jurisdictions, but in Henry County, the conditional use permit, it doesn't expire. It is ongoing and it runs with the property. So it will not sunset unless there's a condition that states that it will.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful, I think, hopefully. For me, it is.
All right. Any additional questions for staff? If not, thank you. And call the case, please.
CU 1909, We Partner Management LLC of Peachtree Corners, Georgia, requests a conditional use for property located at the southwest corner of Mount Carmel Road and South Mount Carmel Road in land lot 150 of the 6th District. The property consists of 11.713 plus or minus acres, and the request is for an assisted living facility in District 2, and the report was presented by Ms. Darley Navarro, Planner 1.
Okay, you've heard the case. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept staff recommendation approval of this request with the 5 outlined conditions, with one additional, that this facility would never be used for any type of drug or alcohol treatment, no drug or alcohol rehab.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Call the next case, please.
Mr. Chair, we're done.
That's right. That was it. I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So be it.